Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Jocelyn Imani. I am the Humanities Director for NEXTfest DC, and I'm so glad to be here for the panel titled Go-Go as a Weapon of Culture. We have some esteemed panelists today, and honestly, I'll spare you the reading of bios because they're legendary. Everybody here on this panel is very remarkable in their own right. But to my immediate right, your left, is Mr. Tom Porter. Where do I start? Reporter, newsman, media magnate, long-time common, retired university professor. The list goes on and on. Then I have Ms. Cherie Agers, better known as Sweet Cherie. The one, the only. I mean, y'all Google her. In preparation for this day, I was explaining who you are to somebody else, and I pulled up the website, and I was like, let me just read this paragraph of artists so you understand. Y'all can look on bio, who you know, performed with, she, and it was some, like, very, like, Michael McDonald or somebody, like, just very, across genres, across spectrums, incomparable writer, artist, indie musician, singer, / Sweet Cherie. And then last but most certainly not least, we have Mr. Donnell Floyd, also known as DFloyd, long time musician, and honestly, arts educator. In these last few years, seriously, moved, transitioned quite beautifully into an arts education space. We're thankful for all of you. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. So that's it. We'll get right into it. So I'd like to ground our conversation. I want to have a fairly free-flowing conversation. I'd like to ground it in some personal reflection. So if you could speak to your first memorable experience of go-go. If you're from here, like when the first time you heard it growing up was, or if you transplanted here, when did you first come to know the genre? And when did you realize that this was its own style of music and its own cultural identity? Anybody?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I was in high school going to Duke Ellington, and I never even heard of go-go. I'm trying to think of what year it was. I know I was a freshman, so maybe it was 79. And I was a classical music student, and one of the guys came to me and asked if I could be in his go-go band. And I was like, what is go-go? Right? Which sounds crazy now, but go-go probably didn't get started till in the neighborhood of 76, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. And so, he gave me a bunch of Ras's tapes and said, study this. And that was my first interaction with go-go at all. So, somewhere in that ballpark.
For me, same with Donnell. I was in school. I was in elementary school in '79. But for me, go-go was on the radio a lot. I heard Chuck Brown on the radio. I heard Sardines and Pork and Beans, Junkyard, things like that. And the kids in the classroom, mainly the boys, they would always be on the desk. They would go boom, 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 boom. In the when the teacher leaves the room, they start doing it, and the girls, we just looking around like, what are they, but they were playing the beats, whatever they heard from their older siblings going to go-go's or the tapes or whatever it was, and they would sing, the go-go chants along with in the class, and the teacher would come and stop banging on those desks, So, back then, go-go, that was like our part of our daily routine. But I didn't really start listening to a lot of go-go until I started playing with Maisha and the Hip Huggers. And I was in my 20s at that time. That was really my first time going to a go-go and really playing in a go-go, because my parents would allow me to go to go-go's back then. All of my friends, I missed out on Go-Go Live. I missed that boat, and I regret that, but, you know, I couldn't go. So playing with Maisha and the Hip Huggers, Maisha was the lead vocalist, and Sugar Bear was the talker, bass player, and Juju played drums. So that was really my first real experience with Go-Go.
Actually, I'm not from DC. I moved to DC in 1970 after having lived in Baltimore for a year. I'm actually from Ohio, from Cincinnati. And I came here to run a program for a college out of Ohio. And I actually had never heard of Go-Go. And in those days, I used to see these kids on the streets banging on buckets and what have you in different places around the city. And after a while, I realized that there were several things. I come to DC earlier for a meeting. I was at the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and before that in court, I'd come to a meeting in DC and Stokely Carmichael, and this was before 1970, took me down on 7th and Georgia. There's a place called the Wings and Things. The chicken ain't nothing but a bird, but the wings are things. And I soon realized that there were several things in DC that you had to be really up on if you wanted to consider yourself up on what was happening in DC, and that was Mambo Salsa Go-Go. So, and then I ran into one of the students at our graduate program was the wife of Daryl. I can't think of Daryl's last name. He's a real tall guy, but he was into promoting. He did a film on Go-Go and what have you. I didn't really hear a lot of Go-Go live because there's a lot of stuff going on in the clubs. I'm 82 now, so I was old then. So the kind of stuff that was going on in the clubs, I thought it would be best for me not to go up in there.
Okay. So I guess I'm asking this question more for DFloyd and Sweet Cherie. How have you seen, or I mean, if you have a comment and support it, feel free. But how have you seen Go-Go used to transmit culture in the city? Like, and let me even be more specific. I came to DC in 2009. I'm not a resident. I came, and I distinctly remember it was a year, Sexy Lady was playing like every day, everywhere. I couldn't get away from this song, and for me, I'm coming from Nashville, Music City, where everybody's very technically proficient. I couldn't understand this music where the singer's singing off key, and nobody's batting an eye. I was like, why are they singing off key and everybody likes it? No shame. But I came to understand that it doesn't matter if the note is right or not. Now, some bands, yes, but when it's something about the feeling of it, and I'm not from here, so I can't speak on it. But from the inside of it, how have you seen? What is this cultural identity that this music carries? I know that's a broad thing, but just speak on any of it.
Yeah, I think it's no different than hip hop, where we have our certain, obviously the music of go-go, but then also you have the way the kids dance, the way people dress. I was in New Orleans and I seen a guy walking. I knew he was a DC guy, just, because he had the New Balance on and, certain things about how we dress and just how, more importantly, in terms of culture, it just gives Washingtonians a sense of pride. I mean, though go-go has not made it greatly into the world, whenever I'm somewhere else in the country, wherever I am, I'm proud as a Washingtonian because a lot of states, a lot of cities don't have their own music. Jamaica has reggae, New York has hip hop, DC has go-go, and so the culture lives in all of those different things.
I agree with Donnell. I'm gonna piggyback on what he says about the lifestyle, the fashion, here in DC, we have stores like the We Are One stores, All Day, Sobiatos, Shooters. All of that signifies DC go-go wear or attire. And so when you see people wearing, and right now we love DC go-go, Mitchcraft, and there's so many, Art and Company. And so when you see that, it signifies DC. If you were to travel somewhere and I wear my Love DC go-go, you know you're from DC. And I think with those We Are Ones, it also represents the neighborhoods that people grew up from. So if you're from Southeast, you wore this. If you're from Northeast, you wore that. And when you come to a go-go, I'm not going to say it's kind of like a representation of a gang, but it's just a hood. It's just the area. And you say, hey, what's up, when you see that person. And it's very prevalent, to this day, And I think it's cool. Just like you said with hip hop, we have our own identity, our own style. And that's one element of go-go.
The thing, I've never been in a city where music captures the entire city, particularly the working class and the black community. I mean, Cincinnati, where I come from, is a music town. King Records is located in the black community, and that's with James Brown, the Midnighters. I mean, Bootsy Collins is from Cincinnati. I grew up with the Isley Brothers, so I come from a town where there's music, but I've never lived in a city. Cincinnati does not have a sound, although because of those bands coming through Cincinnati, you get Midnight Star, Dayton, Roger, and Bootsy and that. But I've never been in a city where a music is identified with the city. I mean, when you think of Chicago, you think about the Strand, the way they dance in Chicago. There's a Philly sound, but it's not rooted in music from Philly. The Philly sound is produced by Gamble and Up. A lot of the musicians are not from Philly. But go-go is an indigenous music to DC, which has a whole culture around it. The way people walk. I was in the military when I was young, and you realize that people from different cities have a way of, if you'd have 1,000 sailors on the base, and all of the black sailors could find out a way to wear their hat a certain way. So there's a way in which they wear hats in DC, there's a way in which they got a swagger with their walk, and what have you. And it's all centered on this thing called go-go.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's true. And I'm still wrapping around how to ask what I want to ask next, so I'll get you there. Last night, I went to the Chocolate City edition of Art All Night, and there was a brother I met who explained how he caught a charge that gave him a life sentence when he was a teenager. So like every other Washingtonian who gets a federal sentence, he was in those federal prisons getting shipped around the country. Like, we know that story. And he said, and the whole time that he was locked up, if they heard go-go, everybody from the DMV would go nuts. It would be this sense of home, it would be familiarity, it would be a remembrance. And for me, I really meditated on that last night because I thought about what is it to be in a situation where people are treating you like you're not human. And then you see something or hear something that snaps you back to remembrance of yourself and jump up. And although I've never been behind the wall, DC is a city that means so much to me because I came here, I tell you I'm from Nashville, but I grew up in DC. So even now that I'm gone, I've been out of the city for 3 years now, it has a similar effect on me. If I hear some go-go, those one or two go-go hits that break through, and you play it on national radio. Y'all, this is a true story. This past summer, I was in Nicodemus, Kansas. It is the only and the oldest town west of the Mississippi. It's a black settlement from the 1800s. Every year, the descendants that settled this town have a homecoming, and they gather. I was in the middle of that homecoming, and they started playing EU's The Butt, and I lost it. I was like, that's so loud. It's something about this art form that's more than just entertainment. It's something about it that's very soulful, it's so much of memory and culture that's wrapped up into the sound. And it's not that it's not like that with other genres, right? I'm sure we all have R&B or gospel or hip hop tracks that do the same thing. But like you said, it's something it's a whole city. It's something. Can y'all speak a little bit of what, for y'all making it and for you like reporting it and observing it over the years, what is that identity, how is that morphed over the time? And what's consistent about go-go and what's new now? I know that was a lot. But I'm just trying to get to the heart of this thing.
I know that to the first thing you spoke about, guys in the federal system, it's different. Like when you're in DC, this neighborhood may be having a war with that neighborhood and so on and so forth. But when they get in the federal system, DC is all one. And so go-go is the rallying, it's the unification of it all. But you know, we've enjoyed an incredible, and also the butt is different. That was the #1 song in the world, right? Correct. That wasn't, you know what I mean? That was one of the songs, and Sugar Bear has 5 of them that was ranked within the top 10 in the world. And, you know, so the bud is different, but go-go just in general and creating go-go, it's always been a great thing. I've had the privilege of being in Rare Essence when I was growing up, and we had several what I would call classics. And so it makes people treat you differently. Now, our crowd treats us differently anyway. Like people who don't know our culture, they always say, oh, you're fans or this, but it's really not fans. Like we're more like peers. We never had a fan kind of thing. You know, it's always like they always just, you know, if you go to the movies and it's the cash register, you don't cashier, you don't have to pay for that movie. But it's more like we're just family, because I don't know, 3 weeks ago I seen Trina Boo, for example. Well, I remember Trina Boo when she was 15 years old. Now she's 50 years old, and we watched each other's kids grow. And I remember her son's father when he died. So in other words, it's not a fan kind of deal, it's a peer kind of deal, and it's a better feeling to me than what national artists have with fans. It's a more warm, welcome kind of deal for me.
I can say from a rhythmic or a musical approach that I was just thinking yesterday, my son, he had a football game, and he's 11 years old. And it was their homecoming, and the DJ, he played all the hip hop stuff that all of the kids their age were like, but he started playing some go-go. It was a backyard, and I just jumped, and I was like, oh, you know, and then I even walked over to him to see, who is this DJ, you know, and he's playing go-go, and it's weird how go-go just gives you that energy. It's something very hypnotic about it. It's like, even for the person that doesn't have rhythm and can't dance, go-go is gonna make you have rhythm and dance. You just do, you know. I mean, I've seen it even, you know, we have shows where, you know, people just jump on the stage and start dancing, and, you know, it just brings that out of them. But I will also say that I've toured a lot, as you had started to mention. I've toured a lot with a lot of major acts. And at the time when I was playing with Chuck Brown, he actually fired me twice because I kept going on the road playing with artists, because that's what's my passion. I just wanted to travel and tour with national acts. And it's weird. So every time when I would come back, you know, he would hire me back because I guess, you know, he couldn't get enough of me, Cherie. You know, that's what it was. But I will tell you honestly, no matter how much I enjoy traveling and playing with these people, I look forward to coming back home that weekend to play on a Chuck show because his music, it was so much different. It wasn't as complicated. It seemed more natural to me, and I could just let my hair down and I can just play and just be myself. And it was all about interacting with the crowd. And when I'm playing with an artist, I'm playing their music. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm playing everything note for note and whatever. And granted, I mean, it's a wonderful experience. I tell any musician, you're in your 20s, whatever, 30s, go on the road, experience that, because it's a great experience. You gotta have that under your belt. But playing go-go, it's just a different type of element, and it's really hard to explain because either you got it or you don't. You know, it's a lot of, drums is like the most important foundation of go-go. And I know a lot of drummers that are on tour and they play with national acts. They always come to me and they say, hey, you got a tape. Well, back then it was tapes. You got, this Chuck Brown, you got Brassens, you got this. They want to learn our rhythms. And sometimes they can't get it. they can't get it. They're phenomenal players. They can play all the jazz, all the, classical and everything, and church and gospel music, but something about that go-go beat, they just can't get it. It doesn't seem natural,
Go-go comes out of really, it really lays bare the class divisions in Washington, D.C. It really comes out of the bowels of D.C. It comes out of the guts of D.C. And, D.C. is I shouldn't know what to do with it, Mike, but go-go was a unifying. I'm usually able to talk loud enough.
No, we want to get it from the office.
Oh, okay. But go-go at the same time, it is a unifying element because of the neighborhood competition. It's a disunifying element, and that's where the kind of violence came in. But it threatened what I want to say is it really threatened the established order. That's why the city came down at one point very hard on go-go. They banned it, what have you, from some public performances and what have you. The power of go-go, and go-go is perhaps the most African music that I've ever heard in terms of the drums. I had an experience, and a friend of mine took me to hear some young people playing go-go one Saturday. And it was interesting. It was nothing interesting or uninteresting. It was go-go. But they were dancing. And they were doing something and they were dancing, kicking up the back. And I went to see Yusu Ndua, who's a well-known African musician, that same evening. And it was the same dance. And it was the same rhythm. So as a cultural, as a potential cultural weapon, it has the potential of really unifying and organizing the city. On the other hand, the powers that be obviously don't want that. And that's where the oppression comes down on go-go. Thanks to Chuck Brown, who connected the go-go with the history of black music. And so Chuck brought in the kind of stuff that Louis Jordan was doing, Run Joe, some other tunes like that. The interesting thing about Chuck Brown's music, there's a consistent theme in Chuck Brown's music about the police messing with the black community. There's a consistent thing in his music. Mo and Joe had a candy store selling fortunes behind the door. Cops came in and Mo ran out. Saturday night fish fry. We were having a party, it was rocking, and the police came and raided the joint. Even on his latest thing, one of his latest things I was listening to, he makes reference to that. The oppression and the police, not just messing with the music, but anytime black people get together and are having fun, the police gonna try and disrupt it, because after all, you don't want the slaves to get together. You know, we'll get into this probably a little bit later, but because we're gonna talk about, hopefully, about the disbursement of black people in the DMV, which is why it's called the DMV. It's called Chocolate City when I got here. I never heard of the DMV till about 10 years ago. you know, so big, it has the potential of being a weapon. On the other hand, it is so isolated. You know, go-go is almost like it belongs to us, but thanks to Miles Davis, who took Sugarfoot in his band, Ricky Wellman, and the reason why he wanted Sugarfoot in the band was because of the go-go music, was because of the drums.
So you hit on a couple of things, but let's talk about the class element of go-go, right? Like go-go is a working class music. And in DC, just like in cities across America, black folks in, say, the 70s into the 80s really start moving as a class mobility move into the suburbs. And in other cities, that first wave of black folks, they turn into like Carlton on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? They kind of shed these lower class elements, but in DC, they took go-go with them to the suburbs. Why do you think that is that even though folks are doing class mobility, they don't let go? What is it about this culture that transmits everywhere?
Yeah, I always thought that, I'm 58, go-go, if it started in 76, that means, it's been around for a good little while, but it started easily on the showmobiles in the inner city of Washington, D.C. Rare Essence very early on was on, these showmobiles, which was going into the hoods. And so, at that time, a kid might be, 14, 15 years old at their first experience. As they grow and mature, I'm assuming, they go on off to college, and so they take the music with them to North Carolina State and Richmond, wherever they're going to school. And so a lot of times you would hear about, oh, there must be some DC kids, they playing that go-go stuff. And when they leave college, they maybe come home and settle into their white-collar jobs or even their blue-collar jobs, but then they start to move out into the suburbs. But they're not going to leave the music behind. Everywhere they've gone, this music has been a signature statement for them to say, I'm a proud Washingtonian. And as they become more affluent, I think they still have that music with them. They just keep it with them wherever they go. And so when I came up in Rare Essence, we had everybody. We had the 14-year-olds from Parkchester, and we had the 45-year-olds from Potomac. We had them all. And so it never was any different to me. They all held onto the music in a same kind of proud kind of way.
My favorite go-go band is Trouble Funk. Because I like the horns.
Yeah.
I like the horns.
Chuck Brown had horns too.
Yes, I'm like that Chuck Brown.
Rare Essence had horns. Don't ever play saxophone. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just saying.
Proceed.
I know, I like the horn, and because I'm concerned about the larger issue. And the larger issue is the DMV represents a dispersal of people, which is a strategy that the system has used from the very, very beginning in dealing with slaves. Not separating slaves who came from the same tribe. In the 60s, they were talking over here about dairy farms. One of the things that happened across the country in the 60s was the building of expressways through black communities. And they called it urban renewal, but we call it Negro removal because that's what it was. In South Africa, in order to keep people from getting together, they put in place something called a scattered sites program. So they scattered people throughout South Africa. So gentrification and the DMV, which is a whole other political geographical statement, which has separated people, because people tend to think I'm from Prince George's County. I'm from here, I'm from there. And in order for the music to continue to survive, oppressed people have to see themselves as a diaspora. We shouldn't see ourselves as Baltimore versus DC, Prince George's County, because it is a diaspora of people who have a common problem and a common history. And in order for the music to survive, we have to begin to think differently about who we are and where we are. And that y'all can't keep go-go to yourself. Y'all gotta let the people have it. You gotta let the people have it. Because it's kind of an inside thing, you know. But we got to, this whole thing about the weapon, obviously I'm interested in politics. And the social roots of music. And go-go is a mighty weapon and could do a lot to change this community. But that's what I like about Chuck, because Chuck brought some social significance. I mean, it's okay, you know, I listen to the overnight scenario. You know, and I understand what it's all about. You know what I mean? Or eating chicken wings late at night. But
I mean, you know, I would also just say on the piece of those socially conscious songs, one of my favorite go-go songs is Cat in the Hat. Because I'm like, that's the crack epidemic. That's the story of the crack epidemic in one song. And everywhere I've gone, I used to work at Smithsonian, and whenever I would tour people through the music section, I would always play Cat in the Hat. Because I'm like, no, you have to listen to this. Because of course, I didn't come to DC in the 90s, and I'm gonna pivot to the next question I have. But I inherited the DC immediately after the 90s. I moved in Trinidad, Northeast DC, right after the blockades, right? So I'm seeing the remnants of a community, the fragments of a community. But we used to do school visits. I was in this prison abolitionist group at Howard. And we used to do school visits, and we would ask the students, how many of you in your immediate family have somebody who's been locked up? 80% of the hands were raised, right? Because of this intensive crackdown on the people, right, in the 90s. And I want to put that to the music. So when we see, like, the crack epidemic and the police were extremely harsh on Washingtonians, but then that didn't exempt go-go. So can y'all speak about the crackdown on go-go in the 90s, like late 80s, 90s, and the shift that changed in the structure of the culture?
So in the late 80s, I think 86 is when crack cocaine got to Washington, D.C. And it changed, well, let me back up just a little bit to where, for the most part, go-go is, the kids that come to go-go, for the most part, were in lower economic situations. And when the crack epidemic hit, they probably were the most affected, one way or the other. Either you were selling it, and so now the Hyundai becomes a Mercedes, or you were using it, and now mom is doing things for money. So it just was very difficult. And so I don't, like when you say go-go, it wasn't that the music had anything to do with any of it, it's that we sung to that community. Luther Vandross didn't sing to that community. You know what I mean? And so our people were affected the most. And so as a result, the police and the city cracked down on the go-go community. It was where a lot of violence was going on, not because, again, it was anything to do with the music, but First and 8th Street now runs into Newton Street, and they have a battle going on. And so a lot of violence was, I remember being at a Masonic Temple the night when one gang, I should just say, even though I know the name of the gang, one gang was beefing with another gang, and then a truck pulls up, me and Foots is looking out the window, and a truck pulls up, and guys all jump to the back of the truck and get these semi-automatic weapons and just start firing on everybody. It was just crazy, but it just speaks to that time when the drugs, not that I think any different of one drug or the other, but crack was different. Your Love Boat was different. You know what I mean? It's not just weed anymore, and it's, you know, the hallucinogenic. I mean, people just was going crazy, and so to me, now that I'm 58, I think rightfully so. I think they cracked down on that community. That was the easiest place to find everyone at a go-go. Back then, I felt it was unfair, but as I look at it, I don't know. I don't know now.
Well, and I just have a quick clarifying question, because I know what it is, but just for posterity, what is Love Boat? Love Boat. I know what it is, but can you just explain it?
You know, do you know what it? Because it's interesting. But at first, Gil Scott Hearn spoke of angel dust. And that's when they was using the chemicals on regular tobacco. And somewhere in the very mid-'80s, but right before crack, again, a very popular drug dealer, right, who had the biggest open-air drug market that we've ever seen right there. We called it Hanover, right? So he ran out of tobacco. So he said, let's put it on the weed. And so the water met the weed, and it took off. It became what we now call not now called Love, but it's what we call Love Boat.
And the water is the PCP.
The water's PCP, and so that's what it kind of, a whole drug grew right out of that. And it was right before crack, and it was just as powerful, but not as profitable.
The important thing to understand that what's happened in DC and what happened in terms of drugs get introduced into the community. They don't grow in the community. Crack does not grow in Southeast or Northeast. The opioid epidemic is not created by people who are hooked on opioids. It's created by the drug dealers. That's how it gets into the community. The larger issue in DC was that you had an administration, which was probably the very administration, because a lot of them were ex-civil rights movement people. It was the closest thing that a city could get into a socialist city within the capitalist order. And I remember the Washington Post had an article about Chocolate City, why you couldn't call it Chocolate City. I mean, they were heavy on that. And the music, go-go represented in DC what roots rock reggae represented in Jamaica. And Muda Baruka, the artist, is around the country talking now about how dance hall, which is not the same as roots rock reggae, it's the same thing. Hip hop, when I interviewed Chuck D, he said that they started off creating recreations for each other. They were not even in it, rap and what have you. And so the early rap and the early hip hop and the go-go and the Jamaica, it was about positive images coming out of the community. Dance hall is about negative behavior. Hip hop is about negative behavior for the most part, if you want to get played on the radio. But it's not only happening in DC, it's not only happening with go-go, it happens in jazz. The Marcellus brothers were brought into jazz to criticize everything that had gone on before. They attacked, one of them attacked Cecil Taylor, said his music was some unmitigated bullshit. Cecil Taylor, who was one of the most well-known musicians. And so it even happened in jazz because music represents different positions of different people. You know, and so whether it's go-go or reggae, what have you, but the larger issue is anything that unifies the oppressed people is a danger to the established order. And go-go was the unifying factor in DC, and it was a threat to the established order.
Cherie, do you want to speak on this? You take us places.
He said it all.
You take us places. I would like to know, and this is just for you, you're a woman in go-go, and there are plenty of sisters in go-go, but to my knowledge, yours is the only all-female band, right? And a lot of times those sisters be the one sister in the midst of shenanigans. And so I'd like to know just from your perspective what that shift, not just from the 90s, but just shifts the waves of go-go. How does that look for you as a woman in go-go in particular? And then I'll open it up for everybody.
When I came into go-go, it wasn't that many females. You had Pleasure Band. I know there was Miss Kim from Rare Essence. There weren't too many of us. And I didn't really feel any pressures or I didn't feel any shifts and things like that because I was treated like one of the guys. You know, they were actually impressed to see a woman. That it was kind of different for them. You know, I didn't have to feel competitive or anything. They just pretty much opened their arms to me and treated me like a little sister. And I learned from the guys. I learned from Sugar Bear. I learned a lot from Juju, Mighty Mo. As I got older, I had talks with Donnell. We played together many times and we have deep conversations. And so having an all-female band, it just characterized a lot of strength because every girl in the band, they have different backgrounds, different personalities, different goals. And it's 9 of us. And we're just all different. And everybody's truth, everybody's history is different. But when we come together, we're strong. And, you know, one of the things that I never like for us to be compared to the guys, but that happens, you know, all they're girls. And I guess it's like a mentality like, you know, when you're a kid, you know, you don't, there's a boy, the boys are playing football and a girl comes out, you know, the boy, they don't want the girl to show them up or anything like that, you know. So sometimes I think that when I get asked questions about what is it like, you know, being in a male dominant, you know, situation or something like that. Sometimes I think some of us, when we may put that pressure on ourselves and we assume that, you know, the guys, they may think of us differently, but no, a lot of them, they really are honored and they like the fact that we can play instruments, we can hold our own. You know, men love strong women. And so we as women, we have to really stay strong, you know, not to weaken ourselves and just do what we're here to do, to play music and represent all women.
Thank you for that. And just for the record, what's the name of this all-female band?
Belladonna. Sorry.
No. That's just, y'all, I couldn't stay out last night because I had to be up here this morning, but I tell you they was cranking last night. It was very good, as always.
Thank you.
Sweet Cherie, there's a musician that I love to death. He keyboardist from DC, stayed in New York forever. Played with Marcellus, Winton. I mean, to me, I just thought he was the greatest keyboardist, and he always says, I was going to flunk out, but I used to cheat off of Sweet Cherie's answers. She's being modest. She's maybe the greatest musician that this go-go scene has ever seen.
1,000%, absolutely. And I tell you, like I told you I'm from Nashville, and if you have questions, be thinking about them because I'm going to ask y'all name. I'm from Nashville, Music City, where you throw a rock in any direction, everybody sing, everybody play, you grow up reading music, you have a clear understanding of music. First time I saw Sweet Cherie, I said, oh, that's a real musician. She's running this, like she's classically trained. And it was at a go-go or somewhere, I was like, oh, well, she's a bad girl. And then I just studied. I've been paying attention to you for years, so I'm like, oh, she's a bad girl. And you don't see that all the time in, not just single, like you're one of the best. And I'm so happy to hear you say that.
I appreciate that, but you know, my family, they keep me humble. Yeah.
Be like, Mom.
Yeah, I mean, like when my grandmother, she always told me there's gonna always be somebody prettier than you. There's gonna be somebody that's more talented than you are. So you just keep your personality, do what you're supposed to do. You know what I mean? To be successful. And however, I have my mom and my dad. They'll be like, is that what you're gonna wear? Or what was that you were playing? You know, that didn't sound right. You know, so, you know, I have a supportive team that they're honest. I like to have honest people around me, not a bunch of yes men, because even with Belladonna, like, you know, we're tough on each other and we're tough on ourselves.
Yes.
We have high expectations for ourselves, and sometimes I have to tell the girls, listen, y'all. Y'all are cranking, you know, whether you believe it or not, and we always compare ourselves to the guys. We for a long time, we compared ourselves to Rare Essence because they're like our brothers, you know, it's about 9 or 10 of them, just like it is of us, and we love their music. We pretty much play Rocket. To this day, we still play Rocket. You know, we play, Freaky Deep, you know, which is a DC staple. When you play that, everybody just knows what that is. So, you know, as women, like I said, you know, we pressure ourselves a lot, but sometimes we have to accept and acknowledge that we are some kick-ass women. You know, we can hang with the fellas. Sometimes we can be better, but that's not what it's all about. You know, with Go-Go, we're just trying to make music. We're trying to have fun and interact and send a message to our crowd.
Yes, I'm gonna give you the mic. Go ahead, sister, and just say your name.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shamika. Okay, so the question I have for the panelists is as artists, one of the ways that we're taught to find our voice is by copying others. And so what do you guys feel when other cultures try to copy go-go music? Or what do you think about that? Because I know like with Disney, there was a whole thing like where if anything was copied from another genre, they have to put a disclaimer up. And so I think that's a bit excessive. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
You know, I think everybody's different. Jay-Z used, I had wrote Overnight Scenario, and Jay-Z came out with a song that was exactly like Overnight Scenario. It was the first single off of one of his albums. I'm not sure what the album was, but when somebody told me about it, they was like, you know, Jay-Z he copied your song. And you hear that a lot, because not in specific, but in general, because it's very difficult to have a concept that someone else doesn't have. So I just didn't pay no attention. But when I heard the song, I was like, oh, he really, and then he came maybe a month later, he came to a DC radio station. Tigger was here at the time, and Tigger asked him about the similarities in the song, and he said, yeah, my manager is from DC, and he gave me a Erasure tape, and that's where I got the song from. Now, to me, people get upset about that. To me, I was thrilled. I mean, this guy wasn't a billionaire then, but he was clearly a leader in rap, and I thought that if he felt strongly enough about something that I wrote that he was going to emulate it. To me, lawsuit and money aside, I was thrilled.
I think that's a great compliment, like he was saying, for someone to, utilize something that you created. And, even on a local tip, like I was saying, how we play a lot of Red Essence music. We play a song by UCB. We've done Sexy Lady. And, some go-go bands, they really get offended when other bands play their music. But to me, I don't really get upset about that. Now, if you're on the same show, like there were plenty of times when we had opened up for Red Essence, I would go to White Boy and I'd say, listen, we might play Lock It. Is it okay? Because they're not going to play it. They have a whole repertoire of stuff. Lock It is like the last thing on their mind. And he's like, go ahead, you got it, you can play it. And then there are times where they will collaborate. They will get on stage with us and do the song. So I think it's just all family. It's all love. It's just kind of like taking a cover song. If we did a song by Beyonce, we're remaking it, making it our own. And I'm sure she's listening somewhere or, and saying, oh, they're playing my song, but making sure that we're not selling it so she can get that royalty. But it's a compliment. I think when someone is using something that you created, that tells you your worth, like, wow, somebody really digs what I'm doing,
And you kind of skipped past it, but did you say you wrote Overnight Scenario? I just want to make sure we underline that right there. Let's carry on. Did you have something to say?
Want to say a little bit of it? 3,
right? Right. Because that's and I have a follow-up question just for you, but did you have something to add?
Well, the challenge for any music, any art form, is to speak to the material conditions of the lives of people at any given stage in their existence. That's the challenge for go-go. That's the challenge for jazz. It's the challenge for any form of music. Is can you take it to the next level? And there's also a difference between plagiarizing and adding something to the music. One of the things that's happening in African music now, a lot of the European musicians who can't really play African music, they're adding strings and all that kind of stuff on top of it. It's no longer African music. It really isn't. So Miles took Ricky Wellman and Sugarfoot added something to his band. It added a whole new different thing. So if somebody copies, musicians like Coltrane, he copied other musicians. And he would give credit, said, this was this cat in there. But to plagiarize, to just steal somebody's stuff, or to pass something off that's fake as a genuine thing, it's different.
Is there another audience question?
Thank you. So my question is, I'm, not from DC, came to go, through friends of mine. But I noticed that as the demographics of DC are changing, a lot of people are adopting the culture of go-go. They've got the t-shirts, they've got the, they might know, they know who Chuck Brown is, things like that, but not really adopting the music. How do you see the changing demographics of the city impacting the longevity of go-go?
I think it's kind of interesting. History has a way of rewriting stuff. When Malcolm X died, he was nobody's hero. Now, however long it's been, he schools and streets are named after Malcolm X. So I think it's a great thing. Cherie spoke of witchcraft, young guy by the name of Montu. Mitchcraft. And young guy by the name of Montu started coming up with these shirts. I love go-go. I love DC. I love go-go. And it's given go-go a whole nother life when maybe go-go was on a decline, actually. Between the incident on Florida where the guy was trying to stop them from playing the music out of the speakers, and so that's when the Don't Mute DC started, and Mitchcraft. And the shirts came at the same time. So to me, I thought at that time go-go was on a decline, and to me, that has given us another push up.
I'm glad you mentioned WDC. There's something, what I noticed, now by the time that happened, I just left the city. And as a Howard alum, I've gotten off the Shaw Metro many a time and made a point to walk that way and get caught at the light and shake off some anxiety right quick before I walk up to the hill, right? There's something weird. Everybody knows shaking it off a little bit. And so when I heard about it, I was incensed. And I wasn't even here. I was incensed that, like, how dare you? What a turn off. And I know, and clearly I wasn't the only one, right? And it felt like, from afar, it felt like that was a bridge too far. And it was like, it woke up sleeper cells all across the DMV, right? Because it was like, y'all been habitually line stepping for too long. Now this too far, right? What is it? Can you speak a little bit, and I do want to ask get a chance for the audience to ask another question, but can you speak a little bit on what it is with go-go that kind of activates that passion? Like, why do you think people got so damn mad about turning the go-go off at a not even a T-Mobile store, a Metro PCS store, of all the things? It was really the box over a Metro PCS store. Why? Anybody?
I think reflective of a lot of things that people were feeling. I mean, everybody feels gentrification, and they talk about it. I mean, I bought my house, which is right around there, from the last white person who lived on the street, and I'm down to the last black owner on the street. I mean, I feel that the culture's changed, the attitudes have changed, and so it was. There are two things that I learned very early in DC. There's two things that people are very passionate about: go-go and mumble song. And they really are. I mean, but they are. And I think that what happened was, it was like, it was like, oh, hell no. It was one of those, every now and then you have an oh, hell no moment. They've gone too far. They're going to turn the music off. The question is, can you take that energy that showed up on 7th in Florida and take it to electing politicians who support the people? Can you take that energy, and what can you do with that energy? And but it showed that there was that turning that music off touched something in a whole lot of people throughout the DMV.
It unified a lot of go-go bands as well, in my opinion, because that's when the Moechella, and they had the bands performing on the trucks and things like that. And I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, my band, we didn't get a chance to do that, but I thought that was really cool. But also, COVID had hit as well. But in turn, that allowed for DC to become the official music of go-go, that Mayor Bowser has signed a proclamation. And the funny thing about that is that, well, I always thought that go-go was DC's music. That's what I always thought. But I guess to have it on paper, I guess it makes sense. I'm a true believer of documentation anyway. So to have it documented and it's stamped that go-go belongs to DC, hello, then, I think some positivity came out of that.
Anything that,
My opinion on this is kind of weird. And I really don't like saying it, but I don't think the guy was really complaining about the go-go music. I think he was complaining about the noise. Like, I don't know if it mattered if it was Bach or Beethoven. He just was saying the noise was too loud.
Did he make it clear? What did he say? I can't
thought it was great. I thought it was great. No matter what it was, I thought it was great that it unified the go-go community to put together Don't Mute DC and to follow up and have some unity. I thought it was great.
And to profit off it, because there's a lot of T-shirts, a lot of Don't Mute T-shirts, and the hashtag Don't Mute DC, on Instagram, and it created a lot of positive noise.
anyone in the audience have a question? Hold up, ask a question. DFloyd, you mentioned writing was classic. And I think one of the common misconceptions about go-go is that there's no original music in go-go, that it's all covers. Can you speak a little bit to the process of writing? And saying, like, the process of writing and the actual musicianship of go-go?
So I think that go-go has gone through a transformation. I don't know if I think it's bad. It's just a transformation. I think early on, go-go was 70, maybe even 80% original music and 20% cover. And then as time moved, it changed. And by the time Maisha came along, it's 100% cover. And it worked. Maisha had some of the greatest lines outside the door of any band ever.
And just
500,
clarify
600 people.
who Maisha is, in case anybody doesn't know.
Well, Maisha, she's a lead vocalist. She's from Indianapolis, but she moved to DC, and she was a jazz singer. She passed away maybe 2 or 3 years ago, God rest her soul. But she was a jazz singer, and she put together a band, and it was originally a 70s band. We used to dress up in Afro wigs and 70s attire, and we would do songs like Ring My Bell, Earth, Wind and Fire, Strawberry Letter 23 type songs. And actually, Sugar Bear, they weren't the original members. It was Ignatius and a few other guys. But somehow the band had transitioned into a go-go band. And we just started playing those 70s songs with a go-go beat. And that's when Sugar Bear and Juju came to play. It just became a hit. Like you said, lines were all over the place. We were gigging about 7 days a week. And then other bands copycatted, and it just became a grown and sexy era. So to some people, it was very profitable, but for some other people, they felt that that was the downfall of the originality of go-go, because at that moment, it was all about bands, even to this day, taking cover songs off the radio and putting a go-go beat underneath it, opposed to taking the time out to write originals. And at the same token, it kind of I want to say spoiled the audience, because when you play your originals, they're not interested in it. We found that when we play our originals, they'd rather hear what's on You Don't Break My Soul. They want to hear that to a go-go beat, so it's kind of weird.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want, and what's the name of the band? Just that when Maisha, the band you were
Maisha and the Hip Huggers.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I had them. So continue.
Right, so I thought Rare Essence was always one of the bands that would always have original music. And so back then, I think we was just messing around at practice and 3 in the morning, the Pancake House. And so we was just starting to talk about, most music is just reflective of, whatever it is. But the interesting thing about it all to me is when it comes to go-go, they make it such a terrible thing that we sing someone else's song. Luther Vandross almost exclusively sings other people's songs. He's a great writer. The songs that he wrote were great songs. But his hits were almost all someone else's songs. And so I think both things are necessary. I think the problem where go-go is concerned is if there was more originality when we had recording contract opportunities, I think go-go would have had a different outcome. Late 80s, I think Sugar Bear had 5 songs in the top 10, and they were all original songs. They might not have been written from Sugar Bear's camp, but they was original songs. So I think whenever Rare Essence, for example, got to Uptown MCA, that was the problem. We couldn't write a song that they would like, they being Puffy and Andre Harrell. And then when they would send songs down, we didn't like their songs. And because we made so much money, we didn't have to accept their songs. And so we didn't find that marriage that was necessary. And that was, I don't want to go too far, but that was the key word in the mid-'80s was marriage. Right? So every go-go band has a marriage. Chuck Brown married go-go to jazz. Backyard marries go-go to hip-hop. Rare Essence married go-go to R&B. So when we were up there with Puffy, who was a Howard University student, and just being an intern up there, but Andre Harrell, The Bud had just become the #1 song, and so Andre Harrell was like, in case go-go becomes something, I better get one of these, right? So he came and got Rare Essence. And as we would sit in his office, that's the word that always came up. How can we marry go-go? What can we marry go-go? What can we marry go-go to? And we had, unfortunately, mutual right of refusal, which seems like a great thing, but in this case to me, like we didn't have to accept what they gave us and they didn't have to accept what we gave them. So we just never agreed on anything.
And is anybody in the office, on the audience? Yes, brother. I'll come your way.
I'm more of an old head, go-go like 80s, 90s. And I loved it then. And when you were saying the transition, I listened to it, but I kept falling back to my old recordings. I make sure I had clear recordings. I remember, I think the reception was when, like us, we would have these recordings, they weren't clear. And when you go to another city or try to introduce it and then hear this cracking of people who had recorded on their boxes, it was a reception thing, you know? They say, oh, that sound like junk over there on Tin Cans and stuff. And I was thinking, you're not listening to it right. So I had this one clear RE from my Sound Temple. It was nice. I was in California. I was, and where was I at? It wasn't LA, it was outside of LA. It was, I think it wasn't, I was staying in Rancho Cucamonga, but I was somewhere where it was a real rough hood called the Crest. Now, I'm in my car and I'm playing my, I slowed it down to low, like 75%, and the bass was kicking, and funk was on it, and he was just grooving. Right? I seen some youngins come out like this. They was just going at it. I never even hear, they never heard go-go before. I know they couldn't have. Because it was a time where they had the Bloods and Crips, and Snoop Dogg was going. I knew it would catch on, but a lot of they just wasn't listening to it properly. it's all perception, I believe. It's all perception. It's all perception of what you hear and how you listen to it. And a lot of times, you know, we were lucky in DC to experience it live. You could feel it. You could be right there. You could. Oh, I just wanted to make a statement. I just wanted to make a statement.
But I agree with you so much. But one thing that isn't perception is the beat, because
You feel that.
to me, there's three. For me, everybody's different. For me, there's three beats that you hear, and I don't care if you're from Jupiter. You're gonna start reggae, salsa, and go-go. And I don't care where you're from. You're gonna start bobbing your head, regardless of whether it's a clear tape or a bad tape. With those three beats, to me, you're gonna start bobbing your head. I don't care what it is.
I have a comment too. It's a bit opposite from this guy. So I'm not from DC, and the first time I went to a go-go concert, it was the Don't Mute DC concert. So it was more like a rally, but people were smoking, so it was a different kind of feel. And I had invited people, and I was like, "Oh, this is the music of DC. Like, come on, y'all, let's go see." And then it ended up being this kind of event that we didn't want to be at. And it was a little bit like embarrassing, you know, and because it was like my first experience with go-go, and I'm inviting other people, like, I heard it's really good. And so I kind of counted go-go music off because of that, because it was loud and they were in there smoking, and I was like, this ain't it, you know? And so like, it took a while, like it's with the covers. So you guys are saying like, which one do you like, the original songs or the covers? It's really cool to hear like the cover song. You know, you listen to Beyonce, next thing you know, it got like that little beat to it. And then the drums start doing some stuff, and then you can start doing, you know, some intervention. So that's why I love go-go. Because I was just with a friend yesterday at the concert over across the street, and every time like the go-go music would really start, she was like, "Oh, I'm not listening to this. I'm ready to go." And I used to be just like her when I first moved here. I was like, "I'm ready to go." They started playing go-go music. It's time to go. But now, where they start to go-go? Where are they playing go-go at? That's where I'm be like that. So yes, just another statement. So.
Can I back up what she was
Well,
saying?
hold on, we got a limited amount of time. And yeah, we got a question. I do want to get to the question.
Hello, my name is Carrie. I'm here on behalf of a nonprofit in DC called The Musicianship. We provide free music ed to all youth in DC, and we have 2 events throughout the year. One of them is the DC Funk Parade right on U Street, and another one is called the Whammy Awards, where you can be publicly nominated and voted for. And I want to let you guys know that we get, at most, 4 go-go nominations every year. So I want to ask, where are our young go-go artists, and how can I get them?
I used to be a member of the Whammies, and I was on the board at one point, and yeah, and it's very tough. We just have to be more diligent in reaching out to the go-go community. There's so many bands, and there's a lot of bands that have a lot of original music. We just don't hear it. There's different styles of go-go. You have the old school go-go. You have the bouncy things. You know, it's so many, and we just have to really, you know, take more initiative to reach out and submit the songs. Matter of fact, you know, in the Grammys, they have a category. It's not a go-go category, but it's called American Roots. And what they did was they created a genre. They created a category where it's all about indigenous music. You have, in that category, American Roots, you have go-go, you have Zydeco, you have from New Orleans. There's Hawaiian music. There's also Indian music as well. So all of that is indigenous, and so they have their own category. But I was told that the more music that you submit, you can establish your own category. At least about 100 entries to have your own category. So we just have to work hard, you know, just to get it out there.
Hey, no, phone in the back. Phone in the back.
Say it again, I couldn't hear you. Yes. He's on the board for the Grammys.
Yeah, we can hear you, family. So I want to editorialize and I want to ask y'all one rapid question. One of the things that drives me nuts is that a lot of people think they don't like go-go's, but when you hear Jill Scott, It's Love, you like that song. Or when you hear Kirk Franklin's Before I Die, you like that song. Or when you hear A. Marie, One Thing, you like that song. That's all go-go. It's all go-go. And I hope that I knew go-go before I knew what go-go was. Because like you mentioned, I went to Fisk University and somebody from Maryland started playing. I said, what is that sound? You know, and I found myself, like you said, moving. And now once I came to understand all the different versions of it, now I can't unhear it in all these other genres. So the wrap-up question, I got a fun one and a more serious one. Let me go serious. As we're looking at the next generation of go-go practitioners, go-go consumers, go-go patriots, I'll say, what's the advice or the words of wisdom you would leave for the audiences and the practitioners so that we can actually leverage this weapon of indigenous culture here better?
Well, first of all, you gotta, for music to expand and grow and develop, it must speak to the conditions and the issues of its day, or else it'll stay small. I mean, that's a significant issue. When Gil Scott Heron wasn't important just because he was a great singer, because he had a great band. He was important because of the things he talked about. That's very, very important. Coltrane was important, not because he could play the saxophone, but he was taking ideas in terms of music, in terms of universal nature, in terms of uniting people around the globe in his music. And what go-go, any music has to do, I mean, I don't think go-go has to change the foundations of go-go. That's what makes go-go go-go. That's what makes go-go unique. But any music has to, I mean, there are issues of the environment, because if you don't deal with the environment, it don't matter what kind of music we're talking about. So the question for all artists today is, as Paul Robeson said, the artist must stand. The artist must stand for something. And the uniqueness about go-go in its heyday is that it represented what was happening in D.C. It really did. And from that sense, it was similar to Gil Scott Heron and anybody else. But for the next generation, and this is true for jazz or any genre of music, you got to offer something to the generation that speaks to them. That speaks to them. And on the other hand, the other question about getting awards and what have you, one of the things that we fought for in the 60s was the right to define ourselves. The right to, you can't tell us what jazz is, to hell with you. You can't tell us what reggae is. That ain't none of your business. I heard a guy talking about Coltrane the other day, doing a whole thing on Coltrane, and he was talking about people who influenced Coltrane, and he was dead wrong. And he's a well-known critic. He was dead wrong. He didn't even mention the bands that Coltrane played, but he mentioned what he wanted to mention, which was his idea about what he thought Coltrane was playing, which had nothing to do with what Coltrane was playing. So, go-go doesn't need to change its foundation. It needs to evolve, and so that our grandkids, our kids will want to hear it.
I would say educate yourself more about go-go. Even the go-go community, I think some of us, we need to educate ourselves more and learn our history. I teach go-go to elementary and middle school kids in DC with a program called Teach the Beat. And what I do, and I can start with kindergartners and first graders. I just teach them the basics of what is go-go. And at that young age, some of them, you'd be surprised, they've heard of go-go, either from their parents playing in a band or playing the music or their older siblings. And some of them never heard of it before, but after they leave my class, one thing they do know is that drums is the heartbeat of go-go. One of the elements is syncopation with the percussion. that's a strong element. And the talker, I give them an opportunity to be a talker and rap or sing or dance, and they just love it. And at the end of the day, they learn a go-go song, something easy like sardines and pork and beans, and when they leave the class, they've learned something. Now, when it comes to the older kids, I get more in depth about the different styles of go-go and the different go-go bands. I try to name them all so I don't forget them. But if you educate yourself, and instead of saying, "Oh, I don't like go-go. I don't like that music. It's jungle music. It's this, whatever they say, whatever." Just take the time out to educate yourself. There's the Martin Luther King Library has information. There's a go-go library in Anacostia. I'm not sure if it's finished yet, but I haven't really been keeping up with that. But just Google, or you can just Google, go see a go-go band. You can Google, look on YouTube and see what band, and just check it out. Don't knock it, without trying it.
When are your bands playing again?
Belladonna, actually, it's not really open to the public. It's a Black Caucus event next Saturday. But if you go on our website, www.belladonnaband.com, or Belladonna Band on Instagram or Facebook, you're able to find out our schedule. We post it just about every day. Beladona.
Yeah, and I think my advice would be to conform. As crazy as it sounds, when we got to Uptown MCA, when they were sending records down to us, we had that whole "you got to keep it real" thing, right? So we never did get our opportunity because we wanted to keep it real. But Coltrane's first song was not Giant Steps. He did many songs with Miles before Giant Steps, and Prince always wanted to be soft and wet, but that wasn't his first song. He did many songs before Soft and Wet. He came in quiet, and then he got to Soft and Wet. Right? And so I would say, if you have the opportunity to reach the masses, even though it might not be the way it might not be you rough it off the way you want to reach the masses, I think I would just, if I had a chance to do it again, I would conform and play it their way until I got an opportunity to do it my way.
You're so right, Donnell, because that's one of the issues that we have with making music. We're so worried about what our peers in with the go-go community is going to think, that it doesn't sound as raw. It doesn't sound like some, raw go-go. Like when you hear it on a PA tape, you heard that riggedy raw go-go. It was thorough. It was cranking, But it seems like when you try to conform to the masses and you want to have that broad audience appreciate you, you have to kind of water it down a little bit, and we're afraid of that. But that's what's going to get you out there. Doing the Butt wasn't really a raw go-go. He doesn't even play that in the city unless it's a festival or something. I mean, you're not going to see Sugar Bear really doing the Butt at a go-go, at a real, at a go-go. But, it's good for, publicity-wise and things like that. But I'm not criticizing the song. I love the song. I played with Sugar Bear. Matter of fact, he performed at my birthday party at Bethesda Blues the other day. I was surprised.
By the way, happy birthday. It's today, right?
Today is my birthday. I'm here with you. I celebrate my birthday with you.
Thank you. That's fine. DFloyd, are you really committed to this retirement? Is this real? Can you retire?
I retired 2 or 3 years ago.
I remember.
2019, because I just had my hip replaced and I couldn't make it. And I was
2019.
disappointed because I couldn't make it.
You're still committed to this. You're sticking with that story.
So,
You're sticking with the story.
Yeah. It's different for me. Like Chuck Brown was old when we met him, right? If we was teenagers, Chuck had to be 35 or 40 years old, right? And he's playing the guitar. Hell, he could have did that till he was 90. Because in our minds, we think B.B. King and, you know.
Right.
But me, I wanted to be a rowdy rapper. And, you know, it just doesn't seem right to me at 50-some years old. It just doesn't seem right.
But let the man in them.
Yeah, but say,
They're still doing it and
God's
the
still
same
doing it.
age.
I just didn't feel right to me.
Nah, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for your input. Thankful for your legacy for each of you. Thank you for your contributions to our culture, not just here in Washington, D.C., but your impacts will continue to reverberate through time and space for generations to come. So I thank you all sincerely for what you've done for us, and I hope we all are inspired by your example. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for watching this video from NEXTfest Culture and Conversation series, presented by CapitalBop. There is no way to fully replicate the spirit of those days at NEXTfest, but we are so glad to have this curated archive to share with you. At CapitalBop, our mission is to promote, present, and preserve the sound and soul of DC. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, or find us at CapitalBop.com. Be sure to subscribe to CapitalBop's YouTube channel for more content like this. And again, that's CapitalBop with an A. CapitalBop.com. Maybe I'll catch you at the next show.